What's up, you guys? Nathan Larsen here with another video for you home studio producers, artists, songwriters, composers. Basically, if you write and record your own music at home, this is the channel for you. And in this video, we're talking about how to use the new Live Loops feature in Logic Pro Live. So I did make a full-blown overview of using Live Loops, basically a tutorial walking through how to use it. And so if you have not seen that video yet, I would recommend checking that out. There are going to be some things I'm not going to talk about in this video just so we can really jump into it that you might want to have some of that information first if you've not already been using Live Loops. So one of the big questions I got with that video was, can you use Live Loops live, like a live looping type of situation? And the answer is yes. Yes. It's yes with a question mark because it's kind of not super intuitive. And frankly, I really wish Logic would have maybe put a little more thought into the fact that if they're going to call something live loops, then we would all be thinking live looping, right? And so they didn't really make it super intuitive and easy to make this work, but it is possible. There are some things that you need to change settings wise to make this work a little better, which I'm going to show you in this video. So before we really jump into this, a couple things that you're going to want to know that you need to have. The first is some sort of a controller to actually trigger these loops, trigger when you can record the loops and record arm different tracks so you can move from one to the next. So you can either use your iPhone or iPad. That's an option. I'm not a really big fan of the iPhone with Logic Remote because the screen is really small. The iPad works pretty well. Or you can get something that is like a MIDI controller that has integration with Live Loops. And so far, it seems that Novation is the first to the party. So with that said, I do want to thank Novation because they did send me the new Launchpad X with integration with the Logic 10.5 update. I'm not sponsored by Novation. They sent it to me and asked me if I would consider doing a video with it. So just for complete transparency, I will never ever endorse a product on this channel that I would not personally use. And I can say I'm actually really impressed with this MIDI controller, and I would recommend it if you're wanting to get into this. We're going to talk a little bit about how it works. I'm not going to do a full-blown tutorial here because that's not what this video is about, but I will be showing you some of the things that you can do, since so far it seems that this is one of the very first MIDI controllers that has integration with Live Loops specifically. If you like this video, if you find value from it, and you maybe find value from other videos I've done, it would mean the world to me if you would consider subscribing, hitting the bell for notifications so you get notified when new videos come out, and give the video a like for the YouTube algorithm. That's what they tell me to say. Who's they? Who's they? I don't have a manager? No, I don't have a manager. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into Logic and let's start taking a look at how to use this thing. All right, so we are in Logic now. This is what it's gonna look like. Again, if you've not seen my whole video on the overview of how to use the Live Loops feature, you should really check that out first because we're not gonna dive into all of the nitty gritty stuff here. I wanna just jump straight into actually using this live. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. I've already got some things set up here so I can demonstrate a little bit, and then I'll show you a full-blown demonstration here in a second with my mobile setup. So the very first thing that we need to know is if we go ahead and record things in the individual cells here, they will not automatically play in terms of how it's set up default. So in other words, if I go in here, and I finish, that loop will automatically stop when I'm done recording, and you have to actually stop the recording in order for it to stop, right? So we need to change that because if we're gonna actually use this in a live situation, we need to be able to record one idea and then move on to the next idea while this idea is still playing, correct? So what we need to do is change some settings here to make this possible, because again, if we record in here, it will not automatically basically begin playing a loop, and then you can actually go ahead and move on to the next one, right, to create the next loop. So what we have to do first is go into the cell defaults here. So you're gonna go into your inspector window, you're gonna have to go into cell, and you want it to say MIDI defaults up here. The way you get that is by making sure you don't have any cells selected. So if you have cells selected, it's gonna say empty MIDI cell, and we wanna make sure it says MIDI defaults. So the very first thing we need to do is open up the play from here. This is where we're going to determine what the cell length and the loop length is going to be. These are linked together. So whatever you do here, it's going to automatically change one toward the other. So, you know, if we want to do a cell length of 4 bars, then the loop length, oh, there we go, now it changes, will automatically be 4 bars as well. Okay, so we want to have that be the case. The loop length, the cell length are the same. That's going to tell us how long is each of these going to last, right? The next thing we want to do is make sure you have quantization turned on. I'm going to do 16th note. You can do whatever you need to do. Obviously, you could even go down and do more complex stuff, 16th and 8th triplet, or whatever you need to do, swings, etc. This is going to make it so once you finish recording, it will automatically quantize what you've done in terms of the MIDI stuff, okay? The next thing you need to do is open up the recording. And the main thing here that you want to change is the recording length. Right now, it's going to do auto. What we need to do is change that to cell length. That is going to mean that this will record as long as we have determined the length of that cell. So that's going to be 4 bars, okay? And then at the record end, you need to make sure that's on play mode. So now that we've got these settings set up, what's going to happen when I record in this cell here, it's going to record it for exactly 4 bars, and then when it's done, it is automatically going to play. Let me show you this. So now I'm done playing and it's looping. So I'm not playing this. This is automatically doing it on its own. Now, the other thing we can notice is that, like I said, since we have auto quantize on, it has automatically quantized that performance to make it perfect. Fantastic. Now, some of the weird things that Logic does that I think is incredibly frustrating. The very first thing is Logic makes it so that if you record something, the very first note drops off. Which is really, really dumb. So in other words, if I record, let's put that piano part back, but let's say that I go ahead and record something that's just one note. Like let's take this pad, for example, and say that I want to just sit on this, let's sit on like a C for the whole thing. Just like that. And just have it just be this wash of sound. This is a really terrible sounding pad, but I just pulled something up. So let's go ahead and do this and watch what happens. I'm gonna go ahead and mute the piano part here so we don't hear it. But watch what happens if I stop playing and expect it just to pick it up, right? Watch. So I'm going to hold this for the full 4 bars. 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3. And let go. What on earth? It does not automatically play that very first note. So we're going to have to wait 2, 3, 4, and then it plays. This is incredibly irritating. Logic needs to figure this out. And if you guys know of a way to fix this, please let me know. I've talked to a few of my other colleagues who use Logic as well, and all of us have had the exact same problem. Does not make any sense. And if there's a setting that we have to change in order to fix this, that's kind of ridiculous. This should not be something you have to change in the settings. I did a lot of looking to figure out how to fix that and could not find anything. Of course, this is a new feature, so there's not a whole lot of support out there quite yet for issues such as these. But Logic, Apple, if you guys are watching, please fix this or make it easier to fix. So the way that we'd have to work around that is you would actually have to hold that for another cycle, which is really dumb. Or what you can do, and I want to show you this as well, is you can customize the individual cells and cell length. So I could change this one to be 2 bars instead of 4. So in order to make this work, I would actually have to hold this note for 4 bars in order for it to then jump. So in other words, you'll record the 2 bars, right? But since it drops out that first note, you're gonna have to then hold it for another 2 bars till the cycle returns. So it'd be like this, 2, 3, 4. This is the second bar. So now I have to hold it even though the loop is done. 2, 3, 4. And then now I can let go. Oh, I didn't let go soon enough. But you guys get the idea. It would then automatically then play that. Now that I've finished that whole deal. And so since it's 2 bars, it'll still work. So if I play all this together. Awesome. So now that works, okay? Now, let's talk about, before we actually start getting into using the different triggering and actually doing this live, because now that we've got the settings set up, what I want to show you is how to work around the fact that you might be working in a set with multiple tempo changes, correct? Because if you're using this live and you're doing it in a show, your songs are all going to be in different tempos, obviously could be different time signatures and all sorts of things like that. So how do you do that, right? Because if I just go in here and just change the tempo manually in here and then change the time signature manually, that takes time to do. So if you're going to be doing a song or a set, right, and you've got different tempos and different time signatures for each of those sets, How do you work with that? Well, I'm going to show you the only way that I can think of to work around that. And that would be to map it all out in the arrangement window, and then basically you have to go from one to the next. And this is actually really kind of irritating. I wish that they would find a little bit more of an intuitive way to do this, but this is what you have to do. So you're going to go into the tempo by opening this one up here. So let's say this first song you're going to do is 120 BPM. But then you want to do something that has different, so you're going to have to go in and actually change the ending to like be way different. So let's take the ending and make it like 500 or something like that, 500 measures. So you're going to have to figure out exactly how many measures that song is going to be. And what I would do is really overshoot, because if you want to extend anything, you want to do anything different, then you're going to want to make sure. So let's say the song is 115 measures long, just theoretically. What I would do is maybe go to like way over like 130 or something like that, and then click there. And then now we can change the tempo. Let's zoom in here. So let's say the next one has a tempo of 90. Then you can go down here and change the tempo to 90. Oop, there it is. And then you've got your next song, way over here or whatever. Oops. With a tempo of, let's say, like 150. So there we go. Now, if you are in this portion of the arrangement window, it will automatically make the change in the loops. So just to give it as an example, I recorded this piano part at 120, but now, since I went to this portion of the arrangement window, it'll automatically reflect that time signature, tempo change in that part. And then obviously if I jump ahead here, this is 150. And so that will be reflected there as well. So is this great? No, I think this is really irritating, but it's kind of the only way I can see you working around this. And I think the main thing is that Logic did not make this to be specifically used in a live setting. This was a production, this is for producing, but you can use it live. You could definitely do this. One of the other things you're going to want to be really careful about is how many plugins you have running, because if you're doing this live and you have a ton of plugins, just be aware that you could have a system overload. You want to be really careful in terms of what you're actually running in here. Okay, cool. So let's actually talk about using this live. You can do this two different ways. The very first way is to have pre-recorded material in these cells. So I could basically go ahead and record a bunch of stuff in here, or if you already have pre-recorded material in an actual production, you could take that and drag them into these cells, and then you could trigger those live. So this is a lot more like backing tracks. It would be incorporating these cells in a way that you're performing it live with other stuff that's happening on stage. Okay, that way is pretty straightforward. Of course, you could record stuff in addition to that, which I'll show you how to do that here in a second. But you would be able to basically, let's say I've got these two parts here. Let's say I've got like another piano part here, 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 all different things going on, and different pads and different drums and all that stuff. You can then go in here and trigger those with a MIDI controller or your iPad. Again, I'm going to be showing you using the Novation Launchpad X here in a second, but then you're going to be able to use that live with pre-recorded material, very much like backing tracks. Is just a little more interactive because you're actually triggering things live rather than just clicking play and then going with it. The second way of doing this is by actually starting entirely from scratch and then doing true live looping. The way you were going to do that is by using MIDI controller like the Novation Launchpad X. I'm going to show you here in just a second. Don't worry, we're getting there. And then like a MIDI controller, like a keyboard, you could use just something like the Launchpad X. You can use an iPad. I'm going to show you a few different options you can use, both with the iPad, with the Launchpad X, and with a combination of all of it. And so what I want to do here is go ahead and come out of the studio. Let's actually take my laptop, the Launchpad, the iPad, and let's go into a little bit of a more of a mobile setting. So we're actually going to go up to the kitchen and demonstrate up there. Let's do it. All right, so we are in my kitchen right now and in the mobile setup. So all I have here is my laptop, my Launchpad X, and then the iPad. So real quick, the very first thing I want to do is walk through how to use this Launchpad X by Novation to integrate with the live loops. So normally, this is going to be oriented this way. So all of the words and stuff you can read normally, but for live loops, you got to swivel it 90 degrees. So all of these pieces here are going to line up with what you see down here in Logic. Okay,
So in order to start basically using this, first things first, I have it set up so it's chromatic. So these are all the C's. It's just a chromatic scale up. I've got this like delayed piano, so. So that's how we could go ahead and play that. Now, what we can do is go to the session window here, push down here, and this is going to record enable. So I can actually record enable anything and everything I want. You can see how that is also record enabling in Logic. This is how I use the Launchpad to determine what I want to record. So now that we've already had our cells default set to only record for 4 bars, it'll automatically start playing. I can record enable here. And then if I push this button again down here, I can then, and then that basically makes it so it'll actually record that cell. Then I can toggle from here into my actual notes, which I can customize how I want to have this set up. I don't want to make this a full-blown tutorial. I just want you to have the gist of it. Now, once we actually start recording stuff in here, as you're going to see in a little bit, I will then be able to control it from the Launchpad. All of these pieces in here will start lighting up as I add stuff. So you can see whenever I click on here, it changes. So it'll look basically like this once I actually fill in all these cells with information, and then I can actually trigger them from here. So if you're going to be using it more like in the backing track type situation where you have pre-recorded material, you'd be able to use the Launchpad to play those. You could also use the iPad to trigger those. You would just push them like you would clicking them with the iPad. So I'm using Logic Remote over here. Again, you can watch my full overview on how this works with the remote and how to hook it up and everything like that, but you can do that on your own. So let's go ahead and actually start messing around with this. So for me personally, I think it's a lot easier to use just the Launchpad as a MIDI controller rather than going back and forth. And so instead I can use the iPad to control what I want to record. Now, the thing that you need to know is that you have to actually use your finger. You can't just go in here and start clicking cells to record. You actually have to enable those cells by clicking on the instrument. Okay, so it is similar in the sense that you actually have to record enable in here, and then you have to toggle out of it, and you know, so do it like that. So we're gonna go ahead and actually do this so you can kind of see how the workflow would be. So we're gonna go ahead and create something that I've already kind of figured out I wanted to do. So we're gonna go ahead and do it here. So what I'm gonna do is for this first round, I'm going to use the iPad to record, and I'm going to use this to play. Okay, let's do it. Here we go. Okay, so there we go. Obviously, I know that was just a bunch of random stuff kind of thrown in there. So we've got information in there now. That works out great. Now I just want to really quickly show you, obviously, again, you can see in here. So now that we have the pre-recorded material, what would this look like for us to start triggering it and using it as if we were doing backing tracks, also layering in things? So I'm actually going to go ahead and turn the iPad off here. We're going to no longer use that. We're just going to use the launch pad and see if we can create something toggling and making the whole thing work here. And we're going to use the pre-recorded material that we already have to kind of demonstrate that first way of kind of using pre-recorded stuff and then building on top of it. Now, the beauty is that if you're doing this live, you would have your microphone hooked up, to a PA and everything like that. So you could certainly use the backing tracks a lot more, and you could play along with it without even looping. You could play with like live instruments and stuff, so you're not even looping or recording those in here, and you're just using the pre-recorded loops. So we're gonna go and give this a shot here, see what we can come up with. So you get the idea. Obviously, I could, really come up with an exquisite deal. I could load up better plugins and libraries and sounds. For me, I just got this laptop, so I'm using just all Logic plugins or instruments for the time being. So I think this will give you a really good idea of what you can do, what is possible in here to do. And so obviously, whether you're using something like the Launchpad Pad X or using your iPad mixed in with a MIDI keyboard or guitar or whatever, there are so many options. I think once you actually start doing it, it's a lot of fun. It gets a little bit nerve-wracking, in my opinion, to start thinking about doing this in front of an audience where you've got all this equipment going on and there's so many things that can go wrong. But one way or the other, it is definitely possible to do this.
If you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, give the video a like if you found any value in it at all, and leave me a comment. Is this something you would use in a live setting? Would you give it a shot? Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Another video.